episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor. Welcome everybody again to another episode of our show with another really fascinating guest helping to make a better tomorrow on many different fronts. Today we have the honor of being joined by Dr. Julie Fratantoni, who is a cognitive neuroscience at the Center for Brain Health, which is part of the University of Texas at Dallas. At the center, Dr. Fratantoni is the head of operations for a landmark research study called the BrainHealth Project, which is all about teaching people different strategies to help maximize their brain performance. Her focus is on education and training individuals to operate at high capacity, reduce stress, achieve goals, and ultimately create a better version of themselves. Dr. Fratantoni also leads the Center's Kindness Enterprise, which is a research and translational program that seeks to uncover and harness the brain's capacity for kindness, empathy, compassion, obviously critical components of overall brain health and well-being. Dr. Fratantoni is also a licensed speech-language pathologist, board-certified in biofeedback, and trained in mindfulness and breathing techniques. She has her PhD in communication science and disorders from the University of Texas at Dallas, her bachelor's in speech language and hearing science, University of Arizona, and her master's in communication disorders also from University of Texas at Dallas. Dr. Julie Fratantoni, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show today.
Thanks, Ira. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great having you. I'd love to start things off, as we typically do, by handing things over to you for a few minutes just to talk a little bit more about you. If you can take us on sort of a little bit of the early journey and everything from where you grew up, when you and how you developed interest in speech, language, hearing sciences, and ultimately how you got into the disorders of communication space. I think that would be a really nice way to start things off.
Sure. So I grew up and born and raised in Scottsdale, Arizona. I am the oldest child. I have one younger sister, and both of my parents are psychologists. So that made for, everyone always jokes that probably made for an interesting childhood and upbringing. And it really did. It did, not maybe in the ways people would normally expect, but I think it exposed me to just a world of being fascinated with trying to understand the brain, various disorders of the brain. And then both my parents worked with kids, my mom in private practice and my dad in the schools. And so really from a young age, I would help my mom would do these social skills groups for children on the autism spectrum. She had another group called Taming the Tornado for kind of anger management with little boys. And anyway, so just had early exposure to this, helping profession that had to do with the brain. So, and the other thing, my parents really always really valued just higher education and learning. And so I feel really fortunate that my whole life had gotten just to have that exposure. And so it's not all that surprising that I ended up being drawn to the field of speech language pathology, which I think is very closely tied to those things. And I initially went into the field and I, wanted to work with kids. But when I was a junior in college, they have this clinician assistant program where you can shadow a graduate student. And I saw this grad student doing therapy with adults with aphasia. And I was like, what is this? This is so fascinating. And adults are, I was immediately, just for the field in general, I was like, wow, nobody talks about, apraxia and these things, like these really interesting things that can go wrong in the brain when it comes to communication, whether that is the actual speech components or the production of language or just the comprehension aspects. And so really was just fascinated with the field in general, and that there is such a variety from, being in the NICU all the way to, a skilled nursing facility, just the whole range of lifespan and how communication affects all of that. And it's not just the speech and hearing mechanism and learning about, your lungs and the physical production of speech, but actually all the intricacies that are involved in the brain. And so I would say that was really learning that language is this window into the brain, that's the primary way that we assess cognition. And so really getting into so yeah, so that was in college, realized, okay, wow, I want to work with adults and I'm interested in the brain. And so choosing a graduate program that would have a lot of opportunities to work in medical settings and see, do rehab with traumatic brain injury and stroke. And so, so that was part of what brought me to UT Dallas. And because we're located right in the medical district and there's a lot of opportunities for internships in hospitals. And so was just really, yeah, happy to get that exposure. And it was probably there that just my curiosity for understanding, well, really it's like, when you get into any field, then you know what you don't know, or you start to know what you don't know, and you see how little we actually understand about language or about cognition, and when things go wrong, when there's injury or disease. And so really chose to get my PhD to just understand those mechanisms, as a clinical person, or having gone into a clinical field, wanting to always, the better we can understand it when it works, the better we can understand it when it breaks, and then develop better interventions and therapies. So that was the spark to then go on and get my PhD in neuroscience. And I was really fortunate to get paired up with Dr. John Hart, who is a neurologist. And so my work was always clinically focused, even, while I was doing research. He does a lot of work with MS patients, or we got to do some cool studies with retired NFL players, and understanding the, long-term effects of word retrieval, and how that is a major complaint after brain injury. And so got to really be exposed to a lot of cool techniques, and just understanding neuroscience. And at the same time, I was completing my clinical fellowship to get my license for speech pathology. And I was at the Center for Brain Health for that, which is also where I was doing my PhD. So the Center for Brain Health, for anyone listening, is part of the University of Texas at Dallas. And so Brain Health is a really special place, and I'll talk more about that a little bit later. But anyway, so I was doing my clinical fellowship there, which was very not traditional when it comes to a speech language pathology fellowship. We're in the world of really cognitive training. And so I was mainly, I got to work with Jennifer Zients as my supervisor then, and we did high performance brain training, is what we called it, with corporate executives, but also with veterans. I got to work with some brain injury patients. We do programs with teens, athletes, young adults, anyway, just across the board, how to apply these cognitive strategies for executive function. And so, so that was where I really discovered my passion for just overall wellness and high performance, and realizing the majority, when you go into a clinical field like speech language pathology, you are only working with disorders. So you kind of think that everything there, it's kind of slanted in your perspective. And then getting into this, it's like, well, actually the majority of the population is healthy, but the majority of the population doesn't know how their brain works, or doesn't know the best strategies for how to use it to operate optimally. And so how fun and exciting to get to, translate that for people, and really give them those tools. So that really opened my eyes to just a new application for the science that I had been learning about. And so, yeah, and so then that kind of takes me up to really completing my PhD, got my license, and then my path has been a little bit winding, but I worked in a hospital for a bit, and then now I'm back at the Center for Brain Health, which is really, feels like home, and just the overall mission to translate science as quickly as possible, get it into programs, into people's hands, working to affect policy, and really at a high level impact just well-being, because your brain drives everything. So getting to be a part of that message and that mission is so energizing to me, and really fun.
Outstanding. Really, really fascinating journey there. And, before we get into the center and everything you have going on there, before the show, I pulled up your dissertation entitled Theta Entrainment to Modulate Cognitive Control of Language Functions. And obviously way over my head and a lot of people, but you're working with, or you did work with non-invasive neuromodulation using this transcranial stimulation and so forth to enhance cognitive control and the healthy brain. I just brought this up because I wanted the audience to appreciate sort of the sophistication of the types of things you study. For a few minutes, just walk us through what your dissertation was all about, because I think when we get into some of the other things you're going to be talking about at the university, I think this really sort of sets the stage for the really 21st century type of technologies that you know how to work with.
Sure. So we could probably spend an entire episode just—
You don't have to re-give the dissertation.
Yes, but this was actually it's fun for me to revisit this because this this was a lot. I spent a lot of time in this world, and so for anyone listening that is not familiar, not in the neuroscience field specifically, or not familiar with neuromodulation, the premise is, the currency of the brain is electric. So, these oscillations, if you're familiar with these frequency bands, you've heard maybe of alpha or theta, that these rhythmic fluctuations in the local field potentials of each neuron is the basic mechanism for neural communication in the brain. And so I think when it comes to, for example, so we've got these specific frequency rhythms, these oscillatory responses that underlie various cognitive processes. And so these patterns of neural firing are going to vary depending on the task that you're doing, the area of the brain that we're looking at, and then the state that you're in. So really looking at these frequency, the neural firing to reveal, to help us understand brain function, and it can help us see, to delineate more large scale brain networks, and then also diagnose even brain disorders. So we see changes in frequency, and just for listeners to think about, you can change the frequency of your brain firing just by closing your eyes. Your alpha is going to increase just by doing math. Yeah, by everyone listening, just tried it. By focusing, by sleeping, you can actually control this internally. But what if we could change these frequencies externally? And so that's really what neuromodulation is. That kind of the underlying question there is if we some outside capability to do this. And I think what largely when it comes to neurotherapeutics, that's largely been, it's pharmacological. So it's at that level, but you're blasting the entire brain. You don't get to choose the region where you stimulate that different neurotransmitter. Whereas with something like, transcranial alternating current stimulation or direct current stimulation, you can better, I would argue, pinpoint that spot of where you're going to increase or alter brain function. So I think to me, it feels very out there. I'm a very holistic person. I'm like, let's do everything natural. Like, let's get your sleep and exercise and diet in order before we go, do other extreme things. But, for certain disorders, or when it really comes to bigger intervention, I think this is the way the brain naturally works. So rather than flooding it with an external substance, this is just having it kind of sync up. And so much of the brain working well has to do with this synchrony in these networks. So just to kind of give that context. And so when you start to introduce an external influence on the brain, we're no longer just observing function and behavior, or structure and behavior, and just kind of that correlation. We're now getting into more causation of how can we manipulate these things, and how does that change performance of the brain. So that's a lot of just kind of the driving questions that underlying that. My specific dissertation, I would say, cognitive control is really what makes us these kind of higher functioning creatures, right? That our brain, that our system has the ability to do things like planning and reasoning and problem solving. And it's the ability to really guide our thoughts and actions based on a goal or instruction, so that we have this kind of bigger control. And it helps to regulate all of our cognitive systems so that we can perform on specific tasks, especially when they're difficult, novel, or complex. And so examples of, cognitive control is a big umbrella. So we've got, attention, error monitoring, online maintenance, verbal retrieval, and then what I honed in on was response selection and inhibition. So basically, our cognitive resources have a limited capacity, and this is the system that's going to allocate what to divert that energy towards and how to accomplish those things well. So focusing on that, I'm trying to I have notes here because I'm trying to figure out how to be most concise when it comes to this, because there's a lot of rabbit trails I could go down. But really wanting to know, when it comes to response inhibition or selection, in thinking about every day, this is talking on the phone while reading an email. So in this situation, you lose track of the conversation. Once you recognize this, that's your monitoring function. That's some cognitive control. And then you give up on the computer, redirect your attention to the phone call. So that's, again, allocating attention. And so that's just a real life example of what that looks like. And then same thing if you're driving and a car suddenly breaks or you need to switch lanes, like this is this kind of being able to, in real time, make these adjustments. And so I wanted to know, can you make that better with stimulation? Can you improve that or enhance that, and first understand that in healthy? But I think where there's more room to actually see improvement there, because what I found, so it was with healthy college students, and you really end up seeing they're high performing because they're healthy college students. So they're really at the top. So there's a little bit of ceiling effect there, but that I think where there's a lot more room for really a lot of potential, and where the future of this is clinical populations. So we know specifically that have impaired cognitive control, like brain injury, Parkinson's disease, Gulf War veterans, ADHD. There's a long list of impairment in that specific function that I think could benefit from it. And then what I have to say from just diving in, and really it's really early stages, and then the difference between, I chose to use alternating current because that is how the neurons fire in these alternating patterns or these oscillations, as opposed to delivering just one direct current that's a continuous stream. So I was kind of just exploring how alternating current works, but my conclusion from all that is that the brain is so complex. And so you can't just picking one brain region and doing, it's these networks. It's not just one spot. And we know that, but to get the timing right of this region at this timing and frequency, and this region at this, and to kind of sync them all up, I think we have a long way to go, because things like language, things like cognitive control, these processes are so complex that just to think that we could just simply give a little burst, and that's specifically for these functions. I think we see tremendous potential for things like motor rehab, stroke rehab, rehabbing use of limbs. There's a whole, so many different applications for this, but specifically for what I was looking at, I think that there's just a lot more we need to understand. And then the individual frequency. So I actually got their peak alpha, because everyone has a different resting peak alpha, so that I could stimulate them at kind of what your ideal frequency is for you. But the next follow-up study for that would probably be, what if I stimulate a little bit above? Does that give you a boost? Or a little bit below? Does that kind of mess you up? And then getting into some of the nuances there. So lots of follow-up, but I think, that's the gist.
It's a great gist, very cool. I sort of, as I said, I just wanted to lay the groundwork with that to show sort of the scope of the stuff that you're working on, and once again, as you were saying, this is not just a biologic thing inside here. It is this bioelectric organ that billions of neurons, trillions of connections, and if these tools allow us to begin to understand and ultimately enhance, you're really on the forefront of this stuff with technology of this nature. So, from that, if we transition over to the Center for Brain Health, your organization has a very broad purview. I see MS, TBI, addiction, Alzheimer's. BrainHealth Project, sort of 3 decades of science shows that you can train your brain to work better, faster, and longer. And then sort of it drills down to these define, measuring, and ultimately enhancing, maintaining, and regaining brain health. Walk us through a little bit of this in terms of how the project got started, there's this brain health index that you talk about in terms of the sort of the combinatorial ways that you monitor brain health and wellness. Walk us through a bit of this, Julie, and take your time with this one, because I know it's an octopus with many tentacles.
Yes, that's a great analogy. So the Center for Brain Health was founded in 1999 by Dr. Sandra Chapman, and she is still our chief founder and director,
Yep.
and truly a visionary when it comes to the brain and how we view it and how we do our research and how we translate it. And so our center is a team of scientists, clinicians, and researchers. And really, yeah, for the last few decades, we've been pioneering cognitive neuroscience research, but really more than that, with such a clinical heartbeat of our center, that we're always wanting to roll that out as quickly as possible. And it typically takes 20 to 40 years for new discoveries to trickle their way down into whether it's public policy or just public knowledge and awareness. And that's way too long. And so that's something that Dr. Chapman has really driven a lot of the work at the center, is we've got to get this out, and that this is too slow for people to not know.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the center, and our mission overall is, it's unlocking human potential through improved brain health and performance. And that truly our brain is at the center of that allows us to do everything that we do. And it's about time that we learn how to take care of it, and we can better understand how it works, and then build a better brain for a better life, for an ultimately better world. And that's where it has to start. So what we are, you mentioned we work with a lot of different populations. There's a ton, but what's neat about being, in 1999 when Sandy founded the center, and she got a trademark on the term brain health, because nobody was thinking about it that way, that everything, even still today, everything with the brain is about disease. It's early detection, or, and it's like, well, early detection is great because sure, then you can, intervene sooner. But what about prior to that? How about prevention? How about we prevent even anything, eliminate the need to detect things, because we're already being proactive. And so I think for listeners out there, I think that the term brain health is not in our everyday vernacular, that we hear mental health a lot. And so I just want to give differentiate those terms. And so mental health is part of brain health, but brain health is this bigger umbrella. And really, I would say mental health is being reactive, that it's waiting until something goes wrong to pay attention to the brain. Whereas brain health is proactive, and brain health is overall all these functions. It's bigger than just mood or depression and anxiety. It's your ability to interact with, social relationships and maintain those. It's your ability, your sense of purpose, your resilience, your daily life responsibilities. It is sleep, exercise, diet. It's also these higher level functions like innovation, creativity, decision-making, problem solving, abstraction, so the brain covers all these bases. And I want people to think about the brain as more than just depression or mental health, right? It's so much bigger than that. And then also that there's so many things we can be doing just to maintain a healthy brain, rather than waiting until, and it's like the analogy of you don't wait to start brushing your teeth, and like, you don't start brushing your teeth when you get a cavity. You brush your teeth every day proactively to keep yourself healthy. And so that's what we want people to start thinking about their brain in a different way, and also just change the conversation around that there's so much stigma, not only around mental health, but just the brain in general, IQ, grades, we're so wired to be, I think, afraid or ashamed of our own brain performance. Or people, when it even comes to assessments that we do, they're like, oh, you're going to tell me that I'm stupid, or you're going to find out, that I'm not, my brain's not working. And it's like, because, the measure IQ was developed to see what's wrong, that all of these measures to this point have been about detecting what's wrong instead of illuminating potential and really showing people, here are your cognitive strengths here, and here are things you can do about it. And I think for a long time, the narrative also around the brain was that you're born with what you've got, you're born with this number of neurons and you don't get any more. And if you hit your head, you lose some, and it's like, it's like too bad. And that couldn't be further from the truth. We have, neuroplasticity research has shown us, and what we've learned in the last few decades about the brain, is that it has this incredible capacity to learn, to rewire, to, to change. And so, and that we can drive that it's not, we don't need medications or other things to do that. Sure, they're appropriate when they're appropriate, but I think the message has not gotten out about that. And so that's a huge impetus for the BrainHealth Project. And the other thing I'll say is that up to this point, largely a lot of what we did was it was all in person. So people would come in person and they would get what we called at the time a brain health physical, making the analogy of you get an annual physical for your body, but you don't do one for your brain. Like, how crazy is that?
Right.
And so let's, be getting an annual brain health physical. We call this now the Brain Health Index. And so people would come in person. We also did trainings, like I mentioned, that I was involved in my fellowship. And these trainings were done in group settings and again, in person. And so we had this need to scale. We need to be able to reach more people. We need to not just only have people that can come to Dallas. And so the Brain Health Project was born from this need to get this information out, to change the conversation, and to reach everyone that wants it, and that has internet connection. So really, the Brain Health Project it's online. We just completed our pilot study for it last year. We kicked it off right as COVID began, which we had planned to do brain imaging with that pilot, and we weren't able to because everything closed. But we were able to still do all the online part, which was great that it was designed to already be online. So that was fortunate for us. And so we completed that study. I'll give some more details on that, but just to catch people up to where we are now, we published the paper on those results this March. So recently that is available. I'll talk about that too. And then we now are doing pilots we are now doing our imaging pilot now that things are opening up again. So going to scan about 200 people to match up that neural data with our behavioral. And then we're doing pilots with a big initiative to reach underserved populations and lower SES, and then with our college students, because COVID has hit everybody hard, but college is, being a part of a college campus, we want to help our students out and give them these tools to be successful. So what we learned, so let me explain what the project is, or what you do in it, if people are listening are curious.
Sure.
It's three main components. So you get a brain health index, and we like for people to do it every 6 months. We know that our brain, depending on what we're doing and what's going on in life, and what stressors we have and things are happening, that's going to be changing all the time. So we want you to think of the index as it's a snapshot in time of that, and knowing that that's going to fluctuate throughout life. We hope that, by equipping people with tools that would continue to only increase over time, but we also know that life is life. And so we want people to be empowered and to see that reflected in these tools. And I think that information, when it comes to even just a lot of like wearables and things that I'm really excited that are now in people's hands, is just having that information about yourself is empowering to see, yes, like I have been really stressed and lost my job and haven't been sleeping. And so I can see how this affects my performance in these other areas. And so getting people to really connect the dots there. And so a huge aspect of just brain health literacy, re-educating, redefining brain health for people is part of the project. But so getting this index. And then you also get coaching is the second big thing. So you get a brain health coach if you're part of the project. And this is, again, all free and all virtual online. And so the coach is going to explain, they're going to walk you through your index. They're going to, show you, here's what we measured, here's what your performance looked like, and then help you set goals specifically for you, for how you use your brain in your daily life and what's relevant to you. And then recommending our training. So that's the third thing. So it's the index, the coaching, and the training. And the training is really ongoing access to cognitive training. And I didn't say this, but we have collaborators, really world-renowned scientists from universities across the country and even international, that are contributing their expertise in various areas. So like Dr. Russell Foster with sleep from Oxford, and getting, Judd Brewer on mindfulness, and having, just these different pieces, because our expertise is the executive function, but we want the training includes, basically, it's this evergreen platform. It's a longitudinal study. I didn't say that. It's for the next 10 years, we hope to enroll 120,000 people, 20,000 being youth. And we want along the way to be, as new science is coming out, to be offering that on the platform that people can engage with and really ultimately help them build brain healthy habits. So engaging with the training, and because it's not just something that you can go on, and this isn't a neuroscience course. You're not going to sit there and just learn and, you know,
Right.
absorb information. We want you to actually apply it. So this is teaching you what are practical things you can do to build a healthier lifestyle for a healthier brain, and to maintain that. And so you mentioned the define, measure, and improve. And so we're trying to define brain health because that hasn't been done before. This is a landmark study in the sense that what's healthy for me is going to be different than what's healthy for you. What you need to eat and how much you need to sleep and how, you know, what your level of engagement is different for every single person. So we hope that by conducting this large longitudinal study that we're going to capture really good information. And if you're familiar with the Framingham study of what that did for heart health, that this is really the Framingham study for the brain, that just by gathering this information on, you know, lifestyle and habits, that will understand what can promote the healthiest brain, and then measuring it. So measuring it with the index, getting those snapshots over time, and then improving it. That's seeing by engaging with the training and applying these strategies, are you able to move the needle? And or just in late in life, the typical trajectory is decline. And so to even maintain is a gain. And so to just have people kind of equipped with that. I do want to say, I didn't mention this also, there's so many aspects to the project. So Dr. Sandy Chapman this is her, you know, her life's work and her mission, and she is leading it. And she has her co-leaders on the project are Dr. Jeff Ling, who you have had on the show, Dr. Ian Robertson, Tom Leppert, and then Admiral McRaven is our spokesperson for the project. And so just want to say that we have incredible leaders and then incredible collaborators that are really helping to have this be the most, I think, one of the most exciting things for the general public when it comes to getting to understand their brain and how to push forward in terms of this category of health that I feel like has been very stuck, very stigmatized, and very just sort of misunderstood, I think, in a way of the kind of negative rather than uplifting and empowering. So really wanting to change the dialogue there. And so we're so excited to be doing that. And the results from the pilot study that we conducted last year, what we saw, so it was a unique snapshot in time because it was a 3-month pilot, and it was right at the peak. Like, we kicked off in March just as everything shut down. And so we got that first time point, and then 3 months later to see how people were doing. And what was really encouraging to see was that people, the majority of people increased by about 10% on their index. And so knowing that in the midst of one of the, a global pandemic, that people were able to learn strategies for things like, stress management and resilience, and were able to really incorporate these things into their life. And so have all kinds of fun case studies that I could share specifically from that. But those people were given the option to stay in for the 10 years. And so they are still a part of it, and it's still going. So yeah, that's what did I leave out? Do you have any questions about findings or how the project works, or just
No, I wanted to just point out to the listeners too, for those that want to dive deep into this, it was in Frontiers in Public Health in March that you published these first, the first couple of months of these findings. It's entitled "A Novel Brain Health Index Prototype Improved by Telehealth Delivered Training During COVID-19." So everybody that wants to go read that, I just wanted to put that out there, and we'll also link to it. One of the while we're on this, Julie, I just wanted to ask, because there was one other piece here, and if you went through this, or if there's something we're going to do, fine. I just want to make sure, because of all the different terms here. Strategic memory, advanced reasoning training, SMART workshops, which you have been instrumental in creating, facilitating. Are these? How does that relate to the program, or is that something separate, or is that sort of the term for the?
Great question, and thank you for letting me clarify. So the SMART, Strategic Memory Advanced Reasoning Training, is the cognitive training that is is part of the project. But I didn't say that, and so that's what we call it, or that's traditionally the types of workshops that we've done. And so, yeah, in the project, you get access to these. And what's great about these is that these are the bread and butter, the core strategies of, for example, strategic attention. It's really all about how you approach incoming information, how you process it, what you do with it, how to better remember it, how to make better decisions from it, all of that. So giving you that, and then every subsequent, topic or training that we give, like for example, the modules on sleep, that you can then use those strategies to synthesize as you take in the other modules. So it's kind of sets you up as with these core skills.
Very cool. Julie, you mentioned the term brain health, which is a really cool term, and it's nice that you trademarked that. I saw you. Actually, you wrote something, I forget actually where it was, but there was another really cool term that you had called brain span. The quote was, human lifespan has doubled the last century, but brain span has not. And then ultimately, who wants to live to be 100 if your brain stops working at 80? And, aging, longevity, this is very hot set of topics that we do a lot on the show, not just sort of the diseases of aging, but, we focus on sort of the upstream biology of aging. Talk just a little bit about this, if you would, and specifically when it comes, obviously, as you mentioned, this thing is very plastic and it's constantly changing. Some very unique changes much later in life, but interesting findings, things you're seeing in the more elderly population that and different learnings in terms of improving this brain span.
Yeah, I think that is. I hope that, I am confident actually that what we learned from the project along the way. The other thing I'll say too is that just because it's a 10-year longitudinal study and we're just getting started doesn't mean that the public or the participants are going to have to wait 10 years to benefit from the findings. So we hope that, each year as we publish and as we feed some of that back into the training, it's interventional. So we're not just, we're not have our, strict kind of variables and control, because you can't control people that, so it's like, we want to just see what is real and what are people doing and how can we nudge them in the right direction. And so with that, with this idea of brain span is that, right, we've focused on, modern medicine has increased our lifespan, but it has not increased our brain span. And so wanting those to match up is a big goal of that. And I think when it comes to aging, I also really hate that a lot of times, and even in the way that, like, for example, a lot of the institutions around NIH and funding are distributed, it's like everything with the brain is aging. There's actually not even a definition for brain health, just its own health topic. It's like, it's with aging. And it's like, but your brain is your whole life, not just when you're old, right? But that's how most of us think about it, or it's like, I won't worry about it until I'm older. And it turns out that is probably not the best approach, because by the time you get there, not that it's too late, but that you're having then a lifetime of habits and things that you've done that have built up that are going to be a lot harder to undo overnight. So I think it's, to me, when we think about aging, you actually have to think about early in life and setting those habits sooner and creating those. But when it does come to, older populations, because I know that that's something that a lot of people are interested in, or they're in that demographic and they're like, well, what can I do? It's not too late. It's never too late, I don't believe. I think that there are a lot of things, just behaviorally, I think, I mentioned again, like the importance of sleep, the importance of just your circadian rhythm being aligned with getting light outside, getting outside, period, movement, stress management, and then social support are kind of the big 5 things that I think are fundamental to having brain function. But specifically when it comes to wanting that to last well into our because we are living longer and longer, that we want that, we want those things. So I kind of lost my train of thought a little bit, but I think
no, you're doing great.
I want to encourage people. Oh yeah, that this is what I was going to say. When it comes to older adults, that the worst thing you could do is retire and stop engaging. So it really is use it or lose it. And it doesn't mean keep working at the, fast breakneck pace you were working at when you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. It means still working and having its purpose, having meaningful work that you have a reason to get up every day and do. That when you lose that, and there's been a lot of studies, and we'll get into some of this with the kindness enterprise that I've looked into when it comes to the importance of social support, social connection, compassion, empathy, kindness, that these things, it sounds like, oh, that's just altruistic and nice and fluffy. And it's actually, no, these are crucial ways that we were wired for this type of community living, interaction, support. And when we are isolated or living on our own or not engaging with people in meaningful ways, brain function declines. So I just want to say that for if you are in an older demographic, whatever you want to define that as, that that those are crucial elements, and that a lot of great studies have shown incredible improvements from doing simple things like volunteering regularly, or having, pairing up, just listening to an interview with someone of, just so there's so many different ways to enhance our brain span. And that's what I'm really excited for people to understand, that it's not just, I have to just accept that I'm just going to decline or turn into a vegetable. That's just really not okay. And I don't want that. And nobody wants that. So, and just when you think about the economic costs of that, the health, the healthcare, not only on the healthcare system, but you think about nursing homes, you think about just these tremendous, loss of, if you had another 20 years of being productive in your career, how much more, could be done. And so I think just to add that perspective as well is important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very important message there. Extremely. Yeah, let's now go to the kindness enterprise, because as mentioned before the show, about a year ago, I got to spend time with Thupten Jinpa, right hand of the Dalai Lama, as main translator for many years. Compassion, kindness, empathy, the big message there. If we could get all that in order, a lot of those problems out there will go away. Talk a little bit about the kindness enterprise, what you're doing with the preschool and the elementary school age children, things you're learning. And I don't know if these overlap, and I apologize if they don't, but I'm throwing all these things at you. I read there also a youth project for the brain health. I don't know if these are the same thing, if they overlap, but if you could say a few words about, because I have kids and they're really much smarter than I ever was. And I'm very intrigued by.
Oh, yeah. So thank you for bringing that up. I didn't mention that so right now the Brain Health Project for adults is ages 18 to 100, right? Just any adult. But we do have a youth pilot, and we'd love for your kids to participate. And that is, I believe, ages 10 to 17. So the sign up, the brainhealthproject.org, you can sign up for either youth or adult. The buttons are right next to each other. And so, and there's more information on them there. But so there's a youth thing for the Brain Health Project, and it's pretty identical, just obviously modified for age-appropriate versions. The Kindness Enterprise is an initiative to understand the neuroscience of kindness, empathy, and compassion, and really that we see this as a crucial element of having a healthy brain. And it's oftentimes, as I mentioned earlier, put in a box of this emotional feel good, thing, and really that there actually is good neuroscience that supports these things, supports how it helps our brain function better, just our overall, even our immune system, stress levels, our parasympathetic nervous system helps, bring more relaxed calm to us. So just a plethora of ways that these things are beneficial. And I mean, I love, to your point about if we can get that right, that would solve so many other things. And I think it does tie back to this notion. I mean, if you think about just evolution and how we started out, that we were wired for being part of a tribe because that was protection and that was essential for survival. So if I didn't have those skills to connect with people or to be included in the group, you weren't going to make it. And and so this is hardwired into us to need people and need care, need love, and need relationships. So when we're missing that, when you have isolation, you see increased risk for depression, increased risk for cardiovascular issues, increased risk for a lot of even just gut issues down the line. And then on the flip side, when we have them, we have better sleep, we have less cognitive decline, we live longer, we just have better brain performance across the board. So just to give that context. And then also it's being part of this, getting outside of yourself, seeing that you're part of something bigger. I touched on the importance of purpose. And so I think being connected to people, a large part of our purpose is it's our families, it's our friends, it's our coworkers, it's these missions that drive us to keep us doing what we're doing. The other really fascinating thing when it comes to, social interactions, compassion, that we were not even our DNA, and I'm big on epigenetics, and I think it's fascinating that, only 2% of our DNA is physical traits, and the other 98% is this, flexible based on our environment. And so, when a human baby is born, the DNA code is not there to develop a fully functioning human. That it requires relationship to learn that. You have to see it modeled, and it requires so much care and attention, and through relationship that you can learn how to function. And we see the detriment of when you don't get that type of model and care. So again, just seeing not only the importance of that kind of foundational development on a brain level or neural level, and developing those networks and those skills, but that even in the cases where maybe people didn't have that to begin with, or children didn't have that you actually can shift that when then they are given that. So just seeing just the possibility there for intervention and doing things that it seems simple, but it's like really the most powerful thing you can do is to mentor someone and be there for that one person. That relational impact is, tremendous, like 100-fold from anything else. So really, it's not just like programs or tools or tricks. It's like, it's life on life, and we have to do it that way. There was something else. Okay. So specifically with our initiative, so my goal is, or my fascination, I think, with this is a slightly different angle. So there's a ton of research. Well, I would say compassion and empathy is a growing field. I think now everyone's starting to pay attention to it and realize, hey, we need these things. These are important. Let's learn more about them and how they work. But what there is a lot less on is really the cognitive component of something like empathy. So when we think about empathy, we usually think about the feeling side of it, this emotional, can you feel what I'm feeling? Can you recognize my emotion? Can you relate to it? And that's important. So that's your affective or feeling side of empathy. But then there's this cognitive side of empathy that really it's perspective taking, and it's the ability to imagine what it's like to be somebody else or in their shoes. And that has been less studied. And so I think with my background being in executive function and in these cognitive skills like perspective taking, which helps with things like problem solving and innovation, right? To be able to see things from multiple angles, that this aspect of, and this part of empathy, we know, because we know those skills are trainable, that this part of empathy is trainable too, just like a muscle that you could practice it in a sense. That you could practice, sitting down and having the hard political conversation where you don't see the same, you don't believe the same things as them, but that you could, do the hard cognitive work of seeing their side. It doesn't mean you have to agree with it, but to actually just see multiple perspectives is a great brain exercise that we can all do more of, right? That's the hard, when you disagree is one of the hardest things to do. So
it is hard.
Yeah, it's challenging, and it's a huge part of empathy. And I think, so I think that's where I'm really interested in understanding that better, and understanding how that can make us better problem solvers, and just, better, because we'll be then able to see more than one side of it. And that's, I saw a quote the other day. It was like, the best way to get along with people is to stop expecting them to be like you. And it's so true. So we're doing, so that's There's a lot. It's another octopus. There's several different branches. One branch that we're doing is starting young, which is what I think is so important. So we're working actually with parents that have preschool age children, and
Hmm.
we're doing this in collaboration with the Children's Kindness Network. And what my team and I did with Maria Johnson, we created these online modules for parents, and they're short, they're quick, because we know parents of really any children, but especially preschool age children, are very busy. And so we just gave them a snippet of brain science behind it and a snippet of here's a practical exercise you can do with your child to model kindness or empathy, and to practice and teach them and show them what that is, and talk about it as a concept. And then for the parent to understand what the brain effect or what's going on there. So we just closed enrollment for that at the end of April. And so they're now going through those modules, and in the coming months, we'll be able to have some results and get that data out there. But yes, I think it's so important, just like I mentioned, from a family standpoint, modeling that for your children, or any children that are in your life, or just people that are in your life, really. But that we chose to start there, start young, and start with just the parent-child interaction to lay that foundation for not only healthy and better brain development, but just the importance of those skills.
Excellent. Really, really interesting. Julie, along our discussion today, you've talked about, we profiled many what I'll call sort of bleeding edge tools in terms of the neuromodulation. You brought up epigenetics before, and yeah, I agree with you in that one, that we're just on the beginning and understanding sort of what that's all about in terms of the entire epigenetic landscape that occurs across these trillions of cells. At Jeff Ling's old stomping grounds at DARPA, a lot of really advanced stuff going on in brain-computer interfaces. It's a really fascinating future for you and neurotech. What are you most excited about? The science and technology themes that are coming at us 5 years, 10 years. Take us on a little, obviously you think about a lot of this stuff that we're talking about. Great. What are some of the things you daydream about? Like if this technology, no unlimited funds, but what are some of the things you think about in the coming years in terms of science and technology in this particular space?
Oh man, I think there's so much, and maybe my answer is unconventional, or I don't know. I think that I'm a huge fan of technology, and there's so much that we can learn, and I mean, so many innovative and novel ways that, we're using machine learning to understand, we're trying to pick these things apart. But I think I actually go the opposite direction of, I think
Okay.
almost the more advanced we get, the more we need to go back to the basics. And so I think that people sometimes look to the next advancement that's going to cure everything, when really everything we need to cure everything is, we already have it. We already have the fundamentals of being able to, have balance in your life, managing stress. I mean, it's like stress and inflammation underlie arguably almost every disorder, or could be a major contributing factor. And it's like alleviating some of those things. So I think it's the start doing, stop doing, keep doing, that there's, I think, several buckets, but I think that there's so much that we already have that we just ignore. Like if everyone just slept 8 hours a night, we see in the literature just crazy numbers of, decreases in depression, decreases in, all of these conditions that improve. And it's like, we have, and these are free. So I think I guess I'm just excited for more people to, it's a kind of a blessing and a curse of COVID for people. I think COVID really, this pandemic put the spotlight on the brain, on mental health, on brain health, on social connection. And I think people are really, it's kind of a nice reset, or hopefully a reset in a lot of ways, for people to recognize what's important, recognize, hey, what we were doing that wasn't working, and then what we can start doing or change how things were. Because I feel like if we continue on the a lot of the lifestyle and habits, the path that we're on with just these processed foods and being sedentary. And, you know, it's like that's causing a lot of problems. So I think I'm just excited for people to be paying attention to that, to be open and receptive, and for them to really understand that they are in control of that, and to not look to their, I don't know, just their insurance companies to be the ones to take care of their health, that their health is their own responsibility, and that we are empowered to do that, and have the tools and know what to do, I think, because most people just don't know what to do. So I think the ways that, and actually I'll say this, I think I'm recently delving into this world of science communication and the importance of really social media and podcasts, and just having these conversations. And so the beauty of technology to connect people across the world, for even us to have the chance to meet and speak and reach different audiences, that I think is translating that science and giving people, arming them with that information, really excites me, because I think we're at a new level of access that we haven't been at before. And so just for the general public, yeah.
No, I appreciate that message. And as you're saying, you know, we have these tools, and I think that's an important thing. I mean, I think most of the rest of people say the thing inside this skull is, you know, all the computers in the world can't match it. So yeah, it has probably a lot of answers, as you're saying, to solve these problems where we don't need all the futuristic stuff. So I think there's something elegant in that as well. And
yeah, and not that we don't need it, or I think we can still tremendously benefit, but I think that a lot of what we need is right in front of us.
Yep. Julie, you know, we talked about many people that you've worked with, hang out with now, Dr. Chapman, Admiral McRaven, Jeff Ling. You talked about your parents at the beginning. Take a little time, if you would, talk about some other mentors, influencers that have been really instrumental along your path to date. I'm sure there's a lot of them, but take a little time to shout out to whomever you want to.
Thank you. This is so important, and I love getting the chance to acknowledge everyone that I'm about to mention. And there's so many people that have really influenced me and mentored me, and wouldn't be where I am without them. So I have to start probably with, of course, my parents, for just giving me the education and the opportunity to do what I'm doing, and for being so supportive and encouraging, just with whatever I was passionate about. And so at University of Arizona, I would say my professors, the first research labs that I was involved in, that really showed me how to do science, how to do research, and were such great teachers. So Dr. Edwin Moss, who is an expert in apraxia and phonetics, I got to do some cool bilingual research with him. Dr. Julie Barkmeyer Kramer, she was our anatomy. She taught anatomy of the speech and hearing mechanism, and we got to, you know, go to the medical school and do actual cadaver dissection and see the lungs and, you know, larynx and all that. And she does fantastic research. And then Dr. Mary Alt, who is really child language development specialist, and just so brilliant when it comes to that space of understanding. I mean, how we learn language is just so complex. And so those were my early lab experiences. And then in my master's and really PhD, Dr. Robert Stillman, I could cry when I just think about how grateful I am for him. He was a huge role in me coming to UT Dallas, got to be involved in some autism research with him while I was there, but he really is the main reason that I got my PhD. And so, and really set me up with Dr. Hart. And so Dr. Stillman has just, I guess, seen in me or guided me in ways that I didn't even realize were so, like, just so spot on for my passion and my interests and skill set, really. So yes, Dr. Stillman, if you listen to this, just know that, and I tell him all the time, but I'm so grateful for his guidance and just such care and support and wisdom, true wisdom, for being in the field for a really long time. And then Dr. Hart, of course, my PhD mentor, who, and the other students in the lab at the same time as me that were like my big brothers and sisters that helped me navigate the pains and
Mm.
woes of being a PhD student, and all the learning. So Shane, Nina, Jeremy, Bambi De La Rosa, who is just brilliant and really was such a big sister to me throughout the whole process, and just helped me not just do science, but think about how to talk about it with the rest of the world, and how to be, excited and creative, and really seeing that a scientist doesn't just have to be a middle-aged white guy in a lab coat, like that there are different, I think there's a notion of that it had to be in a certain box, and it's like, no, you can also be an artist, you can also teach yoga or do dance, or you can, that there's this whole other, there can be many sides to a good scientist. And so Bambi really modeled that for me, and helped me to just be free to be myself, or my own version of what it looks like in my career. Jen Zients, I mentioned, was my supervisor for my clinical fellowship, helped me just this world of smart brain training. And then, of course, Dr. Chapman, who now is my boss and my just mentor, and has given me every opportunity that I cannot express how much gratitude I have to just to be where I am, to have the opportunities I have, to meet the people I do, to be on the projects that I'm a part of, the collaborations. It is like, I couldn't do this anywhere else. I wouldn't be able to. And so Dr. Chapman is really opening so many doors for me. So I am so grateful, and I appreciate getting the chance to just reflect on that, and shout out to all these incredible people.
And it shows that there's, you have to have a village behind you to get this done. No one operates in isolation. And you're talking about for the mental health as well. But this is really exciting, Julie. I mean, it's an amazing portfolio of projects, and you're really on the cusp of some major innovation here and initiatives. And really just wishing you the best with all of this moving forward. For everybody that is going to be listening to this particular episode on the podcast or watching on the YouTube channel, you've been listening to Dr. Julie Fratantoni at the Center for Brain Health, the University of Texas, Dallas, head of operations for the BrainHealth Project, head of the center's Kindness Enterprise. Google her, check out all her publications and really cool things that she's been involved with and she continues to do. Julie, I just want to, again, thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to do this. Thank you for everything you're doing for all of us in terms of brain health and brain span. And as we say on our show, thank you for helping to create a better tomorrow through what you're doing. It's very inspiring stuff.
Thank you so much. This has been such a fun conversation to have. And I'm also on Instagram now, so at Dr. Julie Fratantoni. I love to be in touch with people there. That's the easiest way to reach me.
And we will put all these links into the bio. Be well.
Fantastic. Thank you.